Hello and welcome to AFIELD Trips, a series of video interviews that take us to different cities and contexts where members of the AFIELD community of artists and activists are working towards social change. I'm Awa Konaté, speaking from somewhere between Copenhagen, London, Ivory Coast, and the digital realm, and generally our collective memory.
And I'm Maya, and I'm joining you from London, very close to Awa, actually, but also welcoming you to both Mexico, Cuernavaca, Mexico City, and Argentina.
So to just give an idea and some background about who I am an independent Danish Iranian curator, researcher, and also founder of Culture Art Society, abbreviated as CAS. CS is an interdisciplinary research platform that combines critical studies and art theory to research the cultural economy of African archives, really. And our work is about foregrounding archives of photography, cinema, and visual arts for curatorial approaches and methodologies to facilitate radically different approaches to institutional audience engagement to African cultural productions. And I came to the A field with the intention of also being in community with other people who were doing similar work around archives, but also just trying to find a way of which that CS could be part of a wider support structure. In the beginning of founding CS, really, it was with the intention to engage with the digital realm and engage with digital platforms as a way of both centering decolonial paradigms to bring into focus the art historiography, theory, and practices of African culture workers, but also looking at how the digital realm was such an incredible and important necessary space for people to engage outside of institutional frameworks, to engage with cultural production, to engage with decolonial theory that was not just compounded by being affiliated to an institution. And it was really with the intention of asking, who creates access to these forms of knowledge production and what hierarchies are we circumventing by finding a new space to engage with each other. And, with the years, and as I think I've come to also understand my work a bit better and what it is that I'm trying to do, it's gone from just being a platform that's primarily centered on being in the digital realm or, hosted on Instagram as a way of trying to create access to create a free open source approach to arts education by thinking about a way of perhaps engaging with public platforms and engaging with institutions, perhaps to help them reshift the articulations of how they engage with African artists and generally culture workers of African descent.
Wow. Very inspiring. Well, I guess I'll say a little bit about my background is in film production. So I come from that world, and I'm really interested in sort of transitioning into a world that is related to images and film that is more kind of horizontally structured. And I'm really interested in kind of the spaces that are created both by moving image and also archive to kind of activate different forms of coming together and different forms of commenting as a general interest. So the project that I'm developing at the moment is with a friend of mine who lives in Mexico, but she's from Argentina and was a political prisoner during the dictatorship in Argentina. And she has a whole collection of archival material it's all audio recorded on this like ridiculous device from the early 2000s that creates a file that can no longer be listened to apparently on almost any device. But she has all of these hours of material that she recorded because when she was doing this research, it was about the impact of state terror on the children of people who had been imprisoned, disappeared, or murdered during the dictatorship. And a lot of those people are actually her friends, or in many cases, the children of her friends who were imprisoned with her. So there's like sort of this extensive kind of alternative kinship network of families, and a lot of these children have approached her in the course of their lives to kind of fill in the blanks in some way and about their parents maybe that they never knew, and oftentimes kind of the militancy of these people that had been disappeared were kind of covered up by the family. So she has kind of had this role, and in her interviews is kind of this very much comes through that there's this idea of like filling in kind of these gaps in the story. And so the idea is to work with this archive that she has and help her kind of reconnect with the people. So the project is really about like building this space to activate around these archives that she has to kind of work with the trends or intergenerational kind of transmission of memory in this way. So this is a project that I'm developing with her, and I think I don't know, I think it's very related to, you know, what many of the topics that we've been talking about with both with Filipa and also with Elizabeth, just in terms of, I guess, using the archive to activate memories and conversations, sort of, as Elizabeth says, to like thicken the archive, and in Filipa's work also to like fill in the gaps that exist, especially in a context of dictatorship or of kind of, you know, colonial enterprise.
Because now I'm really curious about what you said, because you work with audio archives, right, from the project that you're currently working on with your friend, and that's so fascinating because we work with archive, but there's a difference in that I actually work with visual archives, and I'm trying to understand how you feel like you navigate that.
In many cases, and I think this is like, there's a very specific example that I can give you, that somebody that came to speak with Graciela was like a child she was a child in prison actually, and she had no image of herself. And when she came to see Graciela, like in her 30s, I don't know, many years later, Graciela had this image of her, and it was the first photograph that she ever saw of herself as a child. Like it just didn't exist. So I think in these spaces, I mean, there is this void of image. Nobody was taking photos in the prisons, you know? And so I think the audio is also a response to the lack of image, I guess, or only existing as a certain type of image, like the images that you would read about in the news. So what I am interested in doing with this project is taking using this audio as sort of the spark to create new images. And like, that's where this project is a film project. So the idea would be to use this as a medium for creating new images that maybe do involve interviews or conversations that happen around the archives. My idea is to create a visual archive towards the future that is based on kind of this void that has existed until now, that is kind of maintained by these processes of storytelling.
I think the way in which that my work or my practice really relates to both Filipa, Sonia, and Elizabeth is that I think Massimiliano articulated very well when he said that images as a space of gathering, or images as from archives to generate South and South solidarity. And to a large extent, I feel that's what CS's work is quite occupied and aligns well with the other practitioners. You know, our work is about, lack of a better word here, it's about democratizing access to archives, but democratizing access to archives that engage with not just, not just people within the diaspora, but engage specifically with the works of people from the African continent, because we identify that there is still a form of discrepancies in what kind of knowledge productions are favored and what kind of knowledges people want to engage with. And more importantly, also looking at how, like in the idea that there is an absence of visual material, that there is an absence of narratives, the archive will always reveal that there is something to be said and that there is a history that one has yet to find. And I think this is how it relates quite well, especially to both Sonia and Filipa's work at the mangroves that they were looking at in Guinea-Bissau.
I like the way that Elizabeth puts it, this idea of like thickening the archive. And I think that like the work that I'm trying to do with Graciela is in some way also responding to that need, or that I mean, they both also talk about that this engagement with the archive as a form of healing. And I think that particularly in this project that I'm working on, and the way that it's connected through the generations is like, I would hope that it would be a space of kind of learning, unlearning, healing that is produced kind of through this engagement. So, and I think there's also this other idea that I really appreciate about what they both talked about the idea of like creating images or creating audiovisual work or films that is not about exploitation. It really is like something that is built for the community, by the community, that is like, can be a process of affirmation or of healing that remains internal to that. And I hope that also with my project, that's first and foremost, that's what it's about, is like making this space to rekindle these conversations that kind of went by, stopped 20 years ago and are now coming back. And I think that's like the main priority. I'm much more interested in the process than I am in the output, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's fascinating is also that shared commonality or trajectory amongst us, both you and I, but also Sonia, Philippa, and Elizabeth, which is that the engagement with archive is a way of instituting a form of care work for our communities, really. And I think that's fascinating considering that the archive has such a tense and quite violent relation to it, but we're finding various ways of navigating that violence and not how to reproduce it as well.
So I think with that, we can wrap it up. And it's been really great to talk with you, Awa. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you and learning how your organization continues to grow and develop.
Absolutely, and likewise as well. And thanks for everyone who tuned in to this.